The Earnestly Speaking podcast is a show that is founded on free-flowing conversation and may at times venture into mature subjects. Listener discretion is advised.
Earnestly Podcast, special edition of the podcast here. It is the political midterms 2022 edition. We are actually just a few days away from the midterms. I know a lot of you guys listen to this podcast. Normally, this is definitely a sports show, mostly a sports show, should I say. But we don't. You guys do know we also dabble into other topics as well throughout the this time of the show. 11 years to this podcast. These are the very important midterms coming up on Tuesday. So obviously, if you're not into politics, obviously you're not going to listen to this episode. But I get it. But this is very important to me. This episode is very important to me. We have a very, very important midterms. I know every year they say that this election is important, but I always told folks that much like the general elections for presidents of the United States and whatnot every 4 years, I think the midterms are just as, if not more important, because when you have Senate seats and representative seats also in the House, these folks have a direct impact, even more direct than the President of the United States has on your life. And the decisions they make directly impacts you locally. So, but I also understand, too, in this political climate, the importance of listening to both sides. Now, I obviously have certain leanings on certain things. I've had a very not strange, but I've had a very interesting journey, politically speaking. Growing up, I've always been into politics. I've since the age of 9, 10 years old, I've always had an intrigue about presidents in the United States and the process and all that. I knew every president in the United States in order from Washington to Bush #1 back in 1989 when I was 9 years old. So I've always had a interest in the political spectrum to some degree. And now that I'm at 42 years old now, even more so, I have to know what's going on, because as a man who has a family and understands that decisions being made are going to impact my family, So, but I also understand the importance of both sides. As someone who was raised fairly conservative, who now I consider myself now moderate, politically speaking. I have some conservative leanings. I have some liberal, leanings. I will say I've probably gone more left as I've gotten older. In some ways, like especially on the social side, I will say. Understanding broader thinking and understanding the impact of things from years back and how it impacts today, but also understand that not every person on the other side is this evil conspiracy theorist. So it's important to me to, when we have these discussions about politics and about policy and about things that matter and things that are important to you or the person that's going to the voting booth, for example, that it's important to listen to people, even if you don't agree with them. Listen. That way, you have information. You know where they're coming from. Listening to somebody doesn't necessarily mean you're going to listen and agree. You're going to listen and take the perspective. So, with that being said, on today's episode, we have two conversations I'm going to have here. One's a conservative writer who was on this podcast last year for the first time. Dean Simpson was a conservative author. Nice guy. Really, he was on the show last year, like I said, November. He's going to present the conservative argument here of why it's better to have the Republicans' leanings into, power, if you will. And then we're going to have on our good friend who's been on the show, obviously, for the last decade or so, Marc Francois. You guys know him, activist, who's actually, this is actually very strange, too, about both Marc and Dean here. Dean, as you'll find out, and you probably did find out on the last episode we did last year with him, is a former Democrat, now Republican conservative. Okay, whereas Marc is a former Republican conservative and now a Democrat, liberal. And Marc Francois, of course, will be on the show as well on the back end of the episode. So both conversations here are about 35, 40 minutes each. The conversation with Dean, there was some technical issues on the show, so I did my best I can to clean up the conversation a little bit in terms of because there was some Wi-Fi issues on his end, and I think to some degree on my end as well too. But it's just presenting both sides of the argument, but two guys that, while they are different on political beliefs, two guys that, honestly, in my opinion, I truly believe care about this country and want to move forward. They just have different opinion in terms of how we get there. So we'll have the first conversation with Dean here, and then in the back end we'll have Marc Francois, and I'll come back and give my predictions for the midterms for next week. So enjoy. Alrighty, joined here once again by conservative author and good friend of mine now, second time on the podcast, Dean Simpson here with us. Dean, how you doing?
Ernest, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
How was your 2022 going?
Thank God. The family's good. Everything's good. A couple of graduations, weddings,
Really?
Everything moving along.
Oh, I never asked you that. How many kids do you have?
I have one daughter, stepdaughter, my wife's daughter. She's my daughter. We've been together since she was 10, and this year she graduated from the University of New Haven, Connecticut.
Oh, right. Okay.
And she graduated from the ROTC, so she has a commission in the Army. And in about 2 months, she graduates from the Fairfax Police Department.
All right.
So she's
God bless her, man.
Yeah, small kid. Good kid.
Right. So last time you were on the show, you were promoting a book, of course. Any projects since then? Like I said, we last spoke late November last year. I think you had said. I think you might have told me that you were working on another book or something like that.
Well, the last book I wrote was Godless v. Liberty, the radical left's quest to destroy America's Judeo-Christian foundation.
Right.
That's a series. So now I'm about halfway through the next one, and I'm pretty excited about it. I mean, just getting a lot of material, a lot of research, just like the last one. There's just a lot of history, and things that it's also contemporary because everything that's going on in the world today, and it ties all in together with our nation. Right.
So when we last did a podcast last year, a lot of people I spoke to, different, regardless of political affiliations, they had really good feedback on the show. Like whether or not they agree or disagree with the political angles of it, they still like the productive conversation we had. You know what I'm saying? And as I told you too, especially, one of the things I liked about you is that you were someone that not just says and has opinions about certain things, but also understands the larger scope of where issues come from and willing to go back into fixing issues beyond just saying it. Oh, that's a problem, and that's it. And a lot of people who got back to me said that, like, at least this guy, gives a shit about people, and he sounds like he cares. I may not be conservative, but this guy seems like he cares. He really does care.
Thank you. I got a lot of that back. Try. That's the best I can do. I try every day to be a good Christian, and
right. All right, so we had discussed about a month ago about doing the show, and obviously this is a bigger thing with the midterms coming up. As of this recording, 13 days away. You had a line by line things you want to discuss about the things that concern you as we head into this midterm, very important midterm too, especially. First thing is the lack of border enforcement. I have to admit, I'm still kind of not in the know about what's real, what's not real about the border stuff. I will say, and people know this, as someone who's very moderate as I am, I'm pro border control. I'm very much pro. Like the only thing I ever criticized Donald Trump for with the wall was that I thought the wall was a waste of money, like literally a waste of money. But in terms of actual border control and whatnot, I'm 100% for border control. What is going on at the border right now since Joe Biden's taken office 2 years ago that's not being, fixed for that matter?
Well, he overturned a lot of Trump's policies.
Right.
That one of them, which was the Remain in Mexico. And by doing so, you didn't have this influx that you have coming in now.
Right.
And what's happened is the word has gone out. The door's open. Come on in. Not only to come in, but it's incentivized because we're going to get you an iPhone. We'll get you a goodie bag. We'll get you, whatever it is. Right. You're only doing something that's going to attract more people. And the people that are getting away, you got to ask yourself, well, listen, if they're basically taking everybody in, who's trying to sneak in? And it's not the best of people. Like right now, to date, in the last year, they've picked up 98 people on the terrorist watch list that have come over the border. But how many have gotten away? That's the scary part.
Right.
Oh, can I say something about, you said something, I don't want to let that go.
Go ahead.
I assume, I could see you're at home, you have your front door. I'm going to assume it's locked. You feel pretty comfortable, right? It feels good?
I'm very comfortable. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. If you lived on the southern border and you had a ranch, I think you'd feel differently about that border wall. It became politicized because people kind of made it seem like it was a xenophobic move by Trump. And in actuality, people on the left, people like Schumer and, a lot of people in the Senate on the left had voted for funding for the border wall before Trump. And it's just part of a system. You have the policing down there, you have the wall, you have the technology. It's all something that's put together to try to keep our sovereign nation and have a system for people to come in properly. By not having the wall, and this came up in a press conference. The one reporter turned around and said, people are just walking right in, and there's no accountability. And the press secretary turned around and said, "That's ridiculous. Nobody's walking into our country." And in the next shot, they went to people just walking right across and coming right across the Rio Grande. So something has to be done, because the amount of people that are coming in here is putting a major strain on our infrastructure, whether it's hospitals, first responders, schools. You have kids coming over here that don't know English. They're being put into regular schools. How's that working out for people that are trying to get their kids educated? Right. So, and plus the people that, I'll tell you something where I take it a little more sensitive than others. I saw what my wife had to do to become an American citizen. She's originally from Colombia. Right. And she didn't cut a line. I mean, she worked her tail off and went through the whole process, and it took her 10 years. So when you see people just coming over, you could see where others may be like, just in fairness, just in, hey, like, this isn't how it should be, and it shouldn't be. But the system is broken, and it needs to get fixed.
No, I agree. But here's my opinion on that too. Also, real quick, I don't think either party wants to fix this border issue. Really, to be honest with you, like when I say either party, like the top of the parties, because to me, once you fix that issue, it's no longer something you can use as a political to dang politically every 4 years. When you run for president. That's kind of my opinion. Like, I feel like the Democrats, like, they say they want to fix the border situation, but they really don't, because once they fix it, it's something one less thing to use as a way as an angle to get votes in a political season.
Well, my father would say, he said if they were all lawyers coming over that wall, they'd have this thing fixed in about 10 minutes. They're not coming. See, this is the problem. They're not coming in for those jobs. They're coming in for the menial jobs. Right. And here you have this is going to be a political show, so I might as well start getting political.
That's all right.
You have the left turning around saying they're there for the little guy, and President Biden's there. They bring up the middle class from the bottom out, and all this rhetoric sounds great. But every time you bring somebody into the country, where are they going? Where are they working? Who's paying for it? So now you have people that are already here looking for jobs, menial jobs that need to get done. The landscaping jobs, the painters, tough jobs. A lot of jobs that some people rather not work. It's laborious. And you have a breakdown in the system where they basically have let these people come in. The wages have dropped. And now the people that are already here are suffering for these policies. And that's where I don't think they're helping. Like, people turn around and say, well, we need to be compassionate. People need to, they need help, from other countries. Nobody is more generous than the United States of America. In history, nobody's been more generous. We had the Hurricane Ian not too long ago down here. Yeah. All right. I don't know. I'm going to assume not a lot of nations came flooding in with help. A lot of people from around the country did. And when something like tragic like that happens, you always see American, whether it's personnel, money, supplies, going to wherever the natural disaster was. We're the most generous nation on the earth. So for people to turn around and say, well, we need to be more compassionate. What about the people that are waiting online? Is that being compassionate to them? is a compassionate the human trafficking that's going on because of this broken policy. By incentivizing them to come over here, you're creating this terrible situation. It's a humanitarian crisis. The most dangerous border. This was written, I wish I can give credit to it, but just take my word for it. Most dangerous border in the world right now, in the world, is our southern border. That's unbelievable. That's the most dangerous border in the world.
Yeah, and by the way, when I said about the wall being against the wall of all this stuff, to me, I looked at Trump in the wall as more like a symbolism thing for him. Like, okay, that's mine. If the wall works, have at it. Again, I'm pro border control, all that. But at the same time, it's one of those things where, okay, I get it. If the wall works, it works. That's what it is. All right. The other thing here, also on the list you wanted to touch on a little bit, is inflation. Yeah, that's pretty much. I think this issue is the number one issue, is the reason why I believe Republicans are gonna clean house this November.
Well, it's okay. I like to change the subject. If that's, I don't want to talk about inflation. I'm only teasing you. That's what Nancy Pelosi said this Sunday on not Meet the Press. Which one was it? One of the Sunday talk shows. That's exactly what she said. She goes, we need to stop talking about inflation, and we need to talk about another subject. To paraphrase her, it was the most ridiculous thing. These people, in my opinion, are disconnected. I have a lot of friends back in New York. Obviously, they're on the other side of the aisle with their thought process. So I love talking to them. They like getting my side of things. I like getting their side of things. At the end of the day, I don't think we change our minds that much. But I do appreciate it, because I'm not one of these people who are going to bang the table and say, I'm right, you're wrong, this is how it is. I'm open for discussion. But when it comes to the inflation, you know what? I have it in front of me. I'm going to read what she said. Okay. Let's see what she said. This past Sunday, Face the Nation. This was Nancy Pelosi.
On CBS, right?
When I hear people talk about inflation, we have to change that subject. Inflation is a global phenomenon. Now, it's very interesting she used the word global phenomenon, because that stuck with me. Because I remember back in school, taking economics, there was a Nobel Prize-winning economist by the name of Milton Friedman. And he used that word to describe inflation. He said it is a phenomenon. But he didn't use global phenomenon. The way he defined it was it's direct to the government. Government controls inflation. So what the administration's trying to do is they have they're in a tough pickle, because you go back 2 years ago, what was inflation? 1.4%. It was over 9% not more than a month or two ago. And right now it's like 8.2%. Right. 1.4 to 8.2. You got some explaining to do. There's only so much you could put this on Putin. There's only so much you could put this on the previous administration. They always have a scapegoat. But at the end of the day, they have to have some responsibility for this jump. And what they're trying to do now is they're trying to create and say that it's a global phenomenon. See, it's not us. And I have a problem with that, because we're a sovereign nation. I don't want to worry about, of course, we're all tied together globally. We've become global markets. Right. That's just the way it is today. I mean, Washington will be turning in his grave over this. That's just, you have 8 billion people. Well, next month, I don't know if you noticed, next month we turn the clock. 8 billion people will be on this planet come next month. All right. We have to be a global society. But in terms of fiscal responsibility, we're not tied into these other nations. We have policies. There was a reason we are at 1.4%. Right. And there's a reason why we're over 8% now. And it goes back to the policies. And one of the direct links to this inflation is energy. And it's insane. Like I said, we have 8 billion people on this planet, and we're going to take fossil fuel off the table. It's catastrophic. It's catastrophic with it. Now, but we're going to do this clean energy, and we're going to have windmills, and we're going to have all this kind of stuff, and everything's we'll live happily ever after. But the technology isn't there yet. Right. You have California saying, we're not going to sell gas cars in 2025, I believe it is. All right. And they're doing all these restrictions, and they're one of the tightest there. But then they turn around the next breath and say, we're going to have rolling blackouts, need to cut back on your electricity. Well, you want me to buy an electric car, but now you're telling me we don't have the grid to support what we have now, and you want us to go further down the road?
It's counterproductive, yeah.
So the policies are what's driving this inflation. It's the policies of this administration. And like I said, it goes back to day one when he killed the XL pipeline. That sent off a shot across the bow to the oil industry and the energy industry that this is not going to be a friendly administration. He came out during the campaign. I give Biden credit. I give the president credit. He didn't lie about it. He said, we're going to put him out of business. We are going to put it. And now he needs, the elections are coming. He's in a tough spot. So now he wants those gas prices to be low. But you just said you're going to put us out of business. You've made it very difficult on these leases, the least amount of leases of any president in modern history. And so instead of pumping here, making things easier for us, he goes to Saudi Arabia, and they're thinking about going to Venezuela. This, to me, is just counterproductive. This is the United States of America. We were energy independent 2 years ago. So everything I go back to 2 years ago. We don't have to go back a long time to say, hey, listen, is this working? And if it was working, if the interest rates were low, this affects everybody, especially the middle class. You go for a car loan. My last car loan was like 2.2%. Go for a car loan today, it's like 7%, 8%.
Crazy, I know. It's crazy.
Mortgages, once the housing market's going to take a tumble. I have a bit of prediction. In my last book, I made a lot of predictions, and a lot of them come to fruition. And then I'm not Nostradamus, but I could just see what was coming. After this midterm, first of all, why is he releasing oil from the emergency reserves? What's the emergency? Oil prices are low. I'm trying to understand. Was there a production problem? Were refineries out? This is supposed to be used just in national emergencies. Right. So President Biden used it purposely to keep them low. Go back to Saudi Arabia. He goes to Saudi Arabia. Everybody thought he went there to ask them to pump more oil. No, he didn't go there for that. He went there because he knew they were going to start OPEC Plus. We're going to start cutting back production. And he didn't, in my opinion, I don't think he really cared, as long as they were going to announce that after the midterms. The fact that Saudi Arabia did it beforehand just shows you the strain we have with one of our allies in that region. Because of once again, back to the policies of this administration. Why is Saudi Arabia upset? They're upset because we're siding with Iran. We want this nuclear deal with Iran. Saudi Arabia's turning around saying they're our enemy. You're supposed to be our ally. Right. President Biden, when he was on a campaign trail, was threatening the prince and, over what happened with the Washington Post reporter. And that's completely understandable and unacceptable what happened. But as Trump said, there's a lot of bad people that we have to deal with. We're going to have to figure this out. We just can't go to war and start bombing everybody that, we don't like or does something that may not be perfectly politically correct. So this is where the inflation situation lies we could bring inflation down very quickly in this country if we just opened up our energy resources. And we're sitting on huge, huge reserves.
But here's the question, why? And if you know that bringing costs down will be a winning issue politically for you as Joe Biden, because that's the one thing I don't, people say, I just think that's the one issue that if cost was low, gas was low, his numbers will be a lot higher than it is now. It's almost like common sense here. What exactly is the reason why he won't do that?
Because they're trying to split the baby. They're trying to appease the left side. This Green New Deal. Right. They're trying to implement these policies that they're not going to have to live with. By the way, they're not the ones that are going to suffer with this. Right. So I kind of feel that this is like a great experiment, and we're the ones. And anytime government starts to play around like this, there's usually some severe consequences. What was the 9 scariest words President Reagan said he ever heard was, it's the government and we're here to help. Help you, yeah. What were you saying, though? The question was why? Why would he do this? Because he has to implement the Green New Deal to a degree. He has to appease that side of it. But he also knows he's got to keep the prices down low enough. See, it's very interesting, the psychological part about this. What's he talking about? He's talking about how gas prices have dropped over $1. Yeah. We're doing much. It's down well under $1 from the highs, $1.50 in some places. Yeah, but it's over $1.50 higher than it was when Trump was in office. Once again, that was 2 years ago. What has drastically happened? And here we go. Yeah. People are going to say, Ukraine. Okay. All right. We're going to use Ukraine. You gotta ask yourself a question, though. How come Putin didn't go into Ukraine when Trump was president? How come the only time in this century he's gone in and have been an aggressor is the only time he didn't go in this century was when Trump was in office? He went in under George W., under Obama, and under Biden. Because when you convey weaknesses and people can see it, they will take advantage of it. You have to negotiate and bargain from strength. So when you try to appease your enemy, like Chamberlain did before World War II, and we saw the disasters in that, you're going to suffer the consequences. So once again, people are going to go back to, well, Ukraine is affecting, food prices, energy prices, and we're going to put everything on this one nation when we have plenty of energy in this country. But then I go to why did this happen, and where are the peace talks? We're so close to nuclear war. This is what kind of is interesting. When Trump was elected president, everybody talked about economy is going to be destroyed. All these apocalyptic predictions. And one of them that kept on getting said over and over again was nuclear war. Oh, we're going to have a nuclear war. He's going to have us at war, this and that. Never came up. He actually walked into North Korea. Okay? I mean, this guy wasn't afraid. Now, Biden is at a fundraiser 2 weeks ago, and he goes, Armageddon is a serious possibility. He says this and goes on vacation. Something serious wrong here. If we're that close to Armageddon, we got to be working night and day. You think JFK during the missile crisis in Cuba, you think he was going to Palm Beach to take in some sun?
And that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure this is the entire Democratic Party like this, but God, I keep saying this. And even Barack Obama said this during the 2020 election. Democrats are so bad at messaging. Like, they have no idea. They're so beyond, they're so disconnected. This is why I believe, like, a lot of reasons why in Florida, for example, the Democrats are doing so bad now in local elections here, because it's not like Florida is necessarily a very conservative state on policy. I mean, again, I've been saying this the last couple of years now. They literally passed $50 an hour minimum wage 2 years ago, okay, on the ballot, okay? That's a very big-time liberal talking point. Recreational marijuana is supposed to be a thing very soon, okay? The problem is the Democratic Party doesn't have a presence here anymore because they are so disconnected with the working class here.
Well,
and comments like that, too, that he made like that is an example of that.
But why? Why is the Democrat Party losing people? They're losing the Latin vote. Because my wife, the last person she wanted to vote for in 2016 was Trump. And when I had a discussion with her, she says, Dean, he's against immigration. I said, no, he's not. He's against illegal immigration. And I had to explain a couple of things because the press skews things. The press, it's really disgusting what's going on in this country with the media. And 2020, I mean, I wrote this in the last book.
Yeah.
I put it, I think the title of the chapter was The Death of Journalism. What happened with the Hunter Biden laptop? And it's the story that doesn't get written that's going to kill us. It's not that. Put your story out there. And if it's nonsense, if it's full of holes, well, your credibility is going to be shot. And that's the freedom of the press. That's why Jefferson, even though Thomas Jefferson was getting killed in the press back then, in the papers, he upheld him. He said, listen, we're not going to take that away. When you start going down this slippery slope of taking that away, then what's next? And then really what it becomes mob rule. It depends. I'm going to decide. I'm going to be the ministry of truth. I will decide what you're going to say. And this thing, fourth largest newspaper in the United States, New York Post, longest publication in the United States. They back their story. And you have Twitter and Facebook and big media turn around and say, we're not going with this. That was a travesty towards our democracy. Right. We're a constitutional republic. But at the end of the day, in a local government, it's democracy. You vote. Whoever gets the most votes as your representative, which is the most important part of the Constitution. It's your first article. That's who's going to represent you. And for them to take that away, to hide that story, and then for Jack Dorsey to come out a month later and say, yeah, we missed that one. We made a mistake. Oh, come on. He made a mistake.
Now look,
those 51 people that signed that letter, the former and current intelligence agents that signed that letter for Biden saying this was typical Russian disinformation regarding the laptop. Mm-hmm. Where's the accountability there? And nobody's asking President Biden about this. He said on stage that this was nonsense. It was all Russian disinformation. And then Trump's famous line right back to him. You got to be kidding me. Russia, Russia, Russia again. So and I get back to that credibility. Mm-hmm. There's a reason CNN and MSNBC are dying in the polls, because people are sitting there turning around saying, this doesn't make sense, because instead of questioning these politicians, instead of going after them and saying, listen, the debates last night, I don't know if you caught any of them. I actually was very proud. I was proud because they went after both sides. And that's what I want. I want both sides to get grilled. Like the one in Pennsylvania, Fetterman.
Okay? Yeah.
They asked him, they said, listen, what's up with fracking? You're for it, you're against it? Oh, no, I'm for it, 100%. I've always been for fracking. And then the moderator turns around and says, but in 2018, sir, this was your quote. And your quote was, I've never been for fracking. I'm completely against fracking. I will always be against fracking. So you have these two conflicting quotes, and they put his coals to the fire. And he couldn't answer. He mumbled it. He's recovering from a stroke, so I'm not saying anything about that. But he had a very difficult time responding to that. But at least they held him accountable. They asked the questions.
Yeah. That's Joel's job, for the record. So... But you would think anyway. Here's one that I really want to touch on a little bit with you too, especially, and that's CRT, critical race theory. Now you itemized it as Marxist CRT. I have to admit, the CRT thing I limped in a lot later. I heard about it a lot in 2021, and then it wasn't until probably earlier this year I dived a little more into the whole what it's all about, that kind of thing. But you put the word Marxist ahead of that, though. Is CRT, in your opinion, solely a Marxist push?
Well, I think that's where they're going. What they're trying to do is they're trying to break up the family unit, and that's, you break up the family unit, and you now have government that is at the center of your universe, and that's why they've taken God out of school. And the idea of socialism, Marxism, eventually communism. This is the road you go down. So you see what's happening in our education system. The kids are suffering from this, and there has to be accountability. You saw the scores come out recently for the fourth graders and eighth graders. They're down
I saw that,
worse than in 40 some odd years.
Yeah, I saw that's really bad.
This was predictable. You keep the kids out; they're going to be on Zoom. But getting back to the critical race theory, the biggest issue I have about that, and I get this from people that I discuss things with and go over ideas with. Why should I be guilty that I'm white? Why? Nobody's ever been able to define systemic racism to me. I don't think there's been a better time in this country for everybody. And, my grandparents came here from Ireland on both sides. What is that? How did the Irish, you think the Irish were accepted when they came over here? This is about division. This is about, keeping the divide, keeping government in control. See, the last thing government wants to do is to give you the power. If you're empowered, you don't need government. That's why small government is the idea. Small government, let people, do for themselves. The people that do need help, government should be there for that. That's different. Government should be there, top priority for securing their citizens, infrastructure, doing things that a government should be doing. The system we have is phenomenal. I mean, our founding fathers, what they put together, starting with local government, your representatives, and then to the state, and then to the federal level that oversees this. But people forget, this system, we have 50 states. That's 50 sovereignties. People sometimes forget that. And we're brought together under this federal umbrella. But at the end of the day, you go back to the states' rights. Mm-hmm. And with the critical race theory, I think that's the biggest issue that they put. First, they said they weren't teaching it. Then they were exposed by especially in Virginia with their curriculum, and it showed it.
And that's the thing. I'm not even I have two kids, and I know they're not being taught that in their schools. I've asked my friends of mine who have parents, and to my knowledge, they have not taught that in their schools. Not saying it's not happening. I just don't see it in my range of networking. That I've asked the questions, and they have not seen anything different on that
Well,
end. But
I'm sure in your school, where your kids are going to school, I doubt they have drag queen Fridays at that school. I'm going to assume they don't.
no, definitely not to have that.
But that's an issue. That's been going on. Why? Why is that going on in these schools?
But is that? And I mean, you're wrong. That shouldn't be anywhere near any child up until 18 years old, anyway, in my opinion. But and I see that out there. Like I see that that's supposed to be a thing, but. How's that a thing? I don't know. I'm surprised. Like, how's that a thing? I don't get that. Like,
I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you what's going on. This is the progressivism. If anybody understands the history and how this is going back to Woodrow Wilson, and you move yourself forward and FDR, and they took these steps, and we look back at them now and say, well, they're pretty moderate steps. I mean, good steps, Social Security, having these social programs, these are good. And the problem with progressives are they don't know when to stop. They just keep on going further and further, and it starts to get more and more bizarre. Mm-hmm. Hence, drag queens in the school, drag queen Fridays. So, to me, I remember in the 2020 presidential election during for the Democrats, Beto O'Rourke was one of the candidates, and he's standing in front of a wall in Texas, and the reporter's asking him, do you think we should have a wall? And of course he turns around and says, nope, there should be no walls, absolutely zero walls, no walls. And the reporter said, what about the one behind us? Should we tear it down? We should tear it down right now. Just tear it down. All these walls have to go. That's bizarre. That's lunacy. But this is what's happened. They go further and further. They're on the debate stage. Should all illegals that come in, and they use the word illegals, or all the migrants that come in, should they be given health care and these benefits?
Yeah.
Every one of them raised their hand and said yes. People, they're coming in here, they're breaking our law, and we're rewarding them as our veterans are homeless and need help. Something's wrong here. So basically, it's just, I can outdo you. I can be more crazy than you, because now we're in this world of how blue can I get my hair? How many rings can I stick up my nose? How many tattoos can I get on my body to show that, I'm an individual?
I mean, on one hand, it's freedom. I get it. It's you do what you want. But I think many of us push back on where it involves kids. That's where I think we all push back on that. I think even someone like me, who's a moderate, like will tell you, no, my kids, if you want to do all that shit, do that shit when you're 18 years old, when you're out of my jurisdiction.
But see, the school system, this is a big pet peeve of mine, because I deal with it firsthand.
Right, you work in the system, right? You do.
I do some work with kids that are behind in their reading. Actually, I wasn't going to promote the program, but something recently happened, and it upset me, so I am going to say it. There's a program where I'm located out in Broward. It's called Reading Pals. It's through United Way. The one school I'm affiliated with this year, they had 30 students that needed a reading pal. It's a volunteer, thing. And so I was talking to one of the coordinators, and she goes, Dean, she goes, this is going to be our worst year. So what are you talking about? There's been only 3 of us in the school, and they needed 30. And that's where I would turn around to my fellow brothers and sisters. It's an hour a week. I mean, listen, if you work during the day, during the week, you're probably not going to be able to do it.
Right.
But if your schedule permits, it's an hour. All right. These kids need it. They are so far behind. What happened with the pandemic, and we were lucky in this state. This is the other thing. We don't have to go far. We don't have to, research history to see what worked. DeSantis kept the state open for the most part, kept the schools open for the most part.
Yeah.
You saw what happened out in California. You saw these other states that closed down. You see people coming down here. That's why I laughed at the debate with Chris and DeSantis when Chris turns around and says, you're the most unfriendly business governor in history. And I'm like, people are just flocking to the state. They want to be here. It's business friendly. It's school friendly. But the education is going to be something that parents need to take responsibility for. This is why I think like charter schools, what they have going on in Arizona, where the parents get to control the money and where they're going to go with that money. I think schools need competition. I think the system that's not working, I did a research on this for the last book in Baltimore. Per capita is one of the most expensive, like the third highest, almost $20,000 a student. And they have high schools that don't have one person at reading level or math level. So what are we spending all this money for? So money's not the issue. So what is the issue? And in my opinion, I think it's the detriment of the teachers union. I think they have a stranglehold. And I think if there was more competition's great. Let's open it up. Let's see what happens. But if you're going to tell me, like, you have somebody like, who's a senator from Massachusetts? I don't want to use the nickname Trump gave her. Warren, Elizabeth Warren. Another one has a problem really, keeping with the truth. She was saying she's against. Now, here's a Democrat against charter schools, which I scratched my head because charter schools, who's it going to help the most? Are the ones that have the least. People that are wealthy. Do you think the pandemic really affected them? No, because they had the means, they had the money to send their kids to private schools. They have tutors. It's the ones that don't have, and that's where the charter schools. This is the next civil rights fight of this nation. If people really realize how bad it is, this was the opportunity for parents to empower themselves.
Right.
And what I was trying to say was about Elizabeth Warren. She was saying how her son went to a public school and how she believes in public schools, so she's against these charter schools.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, it turns out that her son went to a very, very expensive private school. If people really understood how important education is, in my opinion, this is the civil rights effort of this century. It's going to be the dividing point. If kids don't get their education, they don't get their reading, there are direct links to people in prison to their reading level.
Absolutely.
So
I'm with you
now, and the kids are behind.
But this is what I love about you, though, is that whatever conservative, liberal doesn't matter. You go to the core of the problem, to the core. Forget about whatever political party you support or whatever this and that. You're getting to the core issues here of common sense. Education being as growing up in as a kid, that's the number one thing you need to first impress on children is getting right education first and foremost to even have a chance to survive in this world. And you touch on that, and I love that you do that. You go to the core of the problem. So continue.
No, so to me, it's the dividing point. And if I see what's happened in Virginia, I think it's coming, nationwide. The parents are taking back the power, and this is what they need to do. And I understand, like, what do you do in a situation though? We get back to critical race theory. We get back to, the nucleus of the family. What's important. And listen, I know people that don't believe in God. They don't believe in organized religion.
Right.
That's their thing. It's not mine. I see the benefits from it.
Yeah.
But when you start to break away that foundation, the foundation that this country was built on, I think that's why things have gotten so out of hand. I mean, the school shootings, another study I did with the school shootings. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. The first mass shooting was in 1966, University of Texas. Yeah. All right. Over a dozen killed, over something like 30 injured. That was the first one. Now, maybe it's not right for me to use this correlation. It could be skewing the statistic a little bit here.
Right.
But what happened just before that? You had 1963, you had a Supreme Court case that took prayer out of school and then in public school. And then in 64, you had another ruling from the Supreme Court that took the Bible out of school. This was the foundation. Every school had a Bible in it. Back when our founding fathers, for the first 150 years of our nation.
Right.
So now those happened in 63 and 64. You have the first real mass shooting. Before that, the average was about one shooting death a year in the public schools. That was the average from, if I remember, from like 1844. Now you have 1966. Now you fast forward it. I mean, I don't have to tell you all the mass shootings. We've had it. Yeah. We had it down here, tragically. Okay.
Yeah. The
average went from one, and I'm shooting off the top of my head here, so I might be off by one number or something like that, to 14. It was like 14.2 if I did the statistics right. 1 to 14. Something's wrong. Something fundamentally is wrong with our society. And people only turn around and say, well, it's the
right. And that's the thing I kind of get hurt because I'm also someone who grew up in the church and, born again Christian, age 12, the whole thing, but I also am someone who's also pro freedom and do what you want, live and let live. So where do you counter that balance? Because to me, I'm with you with that for the most part. Like the nuclear family, my family is everything to me. Having a foundation, I made sure I didn't have kids before I got married. Because I believe in that solid foundation. But not everybody sees it the same way. And I
you asked a great question, though. You asked about balance.
Balance, right?
when the right starts to take a little bit too much and starts waving the Bible and we're going to do this and you have to do that, I'm against that also.
There you
So
go.
you said, if anything, there are people that are libertarians and people that understand libertarians. There's a lot of stuff that I agree with. There's a lot of stuff that I think that should be more open. I struggled with one of the topics in my book, and for many of my conservative friends, it kind of surprised them when I had a chapter on abortion. And, I said at the end of the day, I won't get into all to everything about the chapter, but I said at the end of the day, the tragedy wasn't that act itself. The tragedy is what happened 4 or 5 steps before that, just like the gangbanger who goes into a liquor store to rob it and kills the owner. Yes, the pulling of the trigger is the tragedy.
But let's go backwards and see
how
we got there. See, that's what I'm trying to say.
And nobody paid. So this is when you ask a great question is, where's the balance? I would say, you take God out of the schools, you take that out of the center of our universe, there's going to be consequences. Every society that's ever done this has collapsed. So we're dealing in a dangerous territory here. But if we're going to do that, the least we could do is put something constructive in its place, like the family. So we'll have God at home. We'll have Bible study at home. We'll go to church. We'll have our community. It's not going to be maybe in the public school, but at least we as parents can control it. Right. So that's the balance. The balance isn't for me to turn around and say, well, it should be illegal abortions. I don't know. We don't live in God's world. We live in Satan's world. So until Jesus comes back, these are the rules, and I'm not going to stand there and fight about them.
Right.
But let's not mistake something. It's morally wrong. So where I have an issue is, I will say, okay, if that's the law, once again, let's misunderstand the law either here. The Dobbs case didn't take Roe v. Wade out of the equation per se. It just put the rights back to the states where they should have been. Remember, if it's not in the Constitution, the 10th Amendment goes back to the states, just empowers the states. And then there's people in Florida can decide, you know what, we think 15 weeks is good, or we think this is good. And it's up for discussion. Give the power back to the people instead of the federal government. But the getting back to the family, the more we get broken down, the worse our society is going to become. And we're no longer looking out for one another on a larger scale. And that's what scares me looking forward. Everybody looks to government to take care of everything.
But again, I think what it is too. Also, I feel like the easy sell is, well, the Democratic Party is the reason this is happening, and I know this part of it is part of the party, that big tent of the party. It is. I think it's just too easy to blame the Democratic Party is the reason that this is what that is. When again, it comes down to personal accountability, and it doesn't matter what party you are. Like Democrats.
Where I blame the Democratic Party right now, is their policies have affected my wallet. Their policies.
Oh yeah, personally. Absolutely.
My car insurance went up $400.
No, I agree.
I'm not too happy about that.
No, right.
Okay, I'm not too happy that my gas on average a year now is $2,000 more. I went to the store to buy a box of cereal the other day. $7.59 for a box of bloody Fruit Loops.
Yeah,
this is nuts. This is.
No, I agree.
And they're letting you know it's going to get worse. The food shortages are coming. They're letting you know. I get very scared when a guy like Bill Gates is starting to buy up farms. I get scared when China's buying up our farms in this country. Never mind Bill Gates. But something's going on here. I try not to get into all these.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with you for the record. What you're saying there, I don't disagree with you at all. I'm just saying that this the rhetoric also is always liberal, and I can't get into that. I like to get into the problem and fixing the problem itself and go from there. I want to touch on 2 more things before we get out of here, because I want to leave some meat on the bone here, because I want to do this again with you very soon. I really do. I truly enjoy having these conversations with you. Quickly, 2 things, and kind of rapid fire if I want to. Which national races right now intrigue you outside of? I'm sure Florida obviously intrigues you, governor's race and all that and whatnot. But what other races outside the state of Florida here intrigues you right now as we get into the final days of the midterms?
Well, I think the Senate very much so. I think the Republicans will take the House. So I think Georgia. I think Walker has a very good chance. I think the debate last night between Oz and Fetterman, I think that interests me. Fetterman should have never been put in that position. He should never run for Senate. But that's the person they put there, and I don't think he should be. I don't think he should be running. So, but here's the question: you just answered this is one thing I want to get out there.
Go.
Everything is wrong right now, in my opinion. gas prices are high, inflation is over 8%. We'll just go down the list. Okay, education numbers came in terrible. Things are pretty bad. All right, how in the heck are these races so close? You look at the polls and everything's like 50-50, 49-51. I'm like, now, one or two things are going to happen. These polls are going to be right, which they haven't been over the last couple of years, starting in 2016.
Right.
Okay. Or there's going to be a red wave. And I really think you're going to see a grassroots movement like you've not seen before. People are upset.
So here's my assessment on that. Before May, I said this was going to be a bloodbath similar to 1994 when the Clinton administration lost everything, to Gingrich and company and whatnot. Probably worse because of inflation. Again, it's the economy, stupid. We know this. And then you have, of course, the between the gun violence that happened recently in Uvalde and all that, and then the Roe v. Wade thing. So when you see that, I've always said for years that Democrats in general, unless they're facing something chaotic or something that's like they have to come to the polls, generally speaking, they don't go out to the polls for the midterms. It's just what it is. They don't do well in midterms normally anyway. Okay. Unless you're okay, for example, 2018, they did well in the House because they're facing Donald Trump, who is very polarizing as it is. We get that. And then we come into like the 2022 and there's nothing really going on. It's inflation and, and the mandate, which by the way, I agree with Republicans on the overreaching the mandates. I cannot stand, we discussed in the last podcast last year, but then you have this thing happen with the gun violence and then of course, Roe v. Wade. So now I'm thinking, well, maybe that's why maybe the Democrats could save face somewhat. But at the end of the day, the number one issue on the ballot here, even more than Roe v. Wade, even more than, gun violence, which is, again, very important issues to talk about, and we should dive into those, is the economy, the inflation. When my pocketbook is an issue and I'm paying $3-4 for gas and more money, paying for food, and that's, 50% more than I paid for 3 years ago. Ultimately, that's the driving force here, and this is why I think Republicans are gonna really still do well in the midterms because. And
you see how that ties back to immigration. See, people don't really see it because they look at it like, well, it's over 300 million people in this country, and they don't feel it maybe directly. But as these people are coming in, that affects inflation. That affects, you have more people coming. You have less of a supply. Mm-hmm. You start doing the numbers. This is what's going to happen. There's going to be a cost factor. Yeah. One last thing, I'll let you go. Because again, I want to do this again before. I actually want to do this again before 2022 is over. Because this is, again, a great discussion. You know anything about Tulsi Gabbard? Tulsi Gabbard. The Democrat that switched parties recently. Yes. You know anything about her? It's funny. A friend of mine he's wary of her. I don't know. Wait, she's from Hawaii. Which friend? She's in the service. Right. She was Democratic presidential candidate that endorsed Biden. Very moderate if you look at some of the policy ideas, but she also has got a lot of support from the right, probably closer to the independent right, not the far right, but the the common sense think you want to call that, very very critical of Biden and company in the last 2 years and everything. And she left the party officially a couple weeks ago, which surprised me that she didn't leave like a year or two earlier, honestly. But that's big. I was just curious if you knew anything about her and your thoughts on her leaving the party. I think the jury's out, because when you have somebody that switch parties like that, you have to a flag goes up. So I kind of like that she went after Kamala Harris at the debate. She called her out, how she had people in prison and for marijuana possession. Meanwhile, she's on a radio show talking about how she's getting high. She mentioned about how Kamala Harris called out about the busing and just a lot of the hypocrisy that was going on the stage for the debate. So she's sharp, she's smart. Like I said, she's a veteran. Her political ambition, I have to wait to see. Like people that are in that middle there can be a little bit controversial, because look on the right. Who do you have? You have Cheney, Liz Cheney. Like people wouldn't consider her a Republican anymore, and you have people on the Democrat side that like her. So they like her because she's anti-Trump, but she's still by policy a conservative. At least to my at least what I've seen. Next time we talk, I'll research that. I don't think she's as much conservative as you think she is. She's very much like her father. She there's not a war they don't like. Yeah. So yeah. And sadly, the Democrat Party is falling into this step also. Where are the peace talks? Where are the bloody peace talks? This guy's talking about Armageddon. Where are the peace talks? Yeah. This is scary stuff. And that's what people should start waking up to. Because when it starts to go, they have a commercial up in New York, when it hits, when the big one finally hits, this is what you need to do. Hey, what do you need to do?
Yeah.
Au revoir, man. This is nuclear war.
I'm trying to avoid it. Yeah.
This isn't a hurricane. This isn't a tornado. This is au revoir. So it's insanity that they're talking about Armageddon like, oh, yeah, this might happen. Yeah. Hey, how about we pick up a phone? How about we can have a conference? But something tells me, like learned a long time ago, if something doesn't make sense, usually goes back to money. It's a hell of a lot of money going over to Ukraine right now. It's funny how this little bloody country is in the middle of a lot of our stuff. They were in the middle of one of our impeachments. Now they got us tangled into this bloody war. That smells to high heaven. That I got a problem with. This has got to get solved. People, where's the UN? And I'm not big on the UN, but
of course,
where are the peace talks? What are we going to do about this? Instead of just keep on throwing money over there. Yeah, and where's the left? The left. Where's the peace?
And a lot of Democrats actually, I spoke with you also. We'll agree with you on that too.
Make love, not war. What happened to all that stuff? And these people are wearing their Ukraine pins, and we got to save Ukraine. They're not NATO. We got to figure this thing out, because how much are we going to sacrifice?
There, real quick.
And according to Biden, he's willing to go all the way. Oh, we're going to go as far as we need to go. That's scary as hell.
Yeah. Dean, as always, thank you so much. Great conversation. And like I said, we'll talk about this probably. I'm hoping to get a podcast again before the year's over. And I guess we can review the midterms after and see where we're going into 2023 and beyond. All right, we are here, of course, with our old friend, longtime alum of this podcast, Marc Francois, activist, busy man with a beard now. A little goatee action there. What's going on? You're on my level now.
It's a brisk and frosty, like 63 degrees here in San Diego. So I've got, I'm bundled up. I'm growing my winter beard.
Mm-hmm.
We could see temperatures dipping down into like the high 50s this week.
We're still in the 80s here. We're still in the 80s here. It's November. We're still in the 80s here in Florida. I mean, it's obvious reasons. Yeah, you know how it is. We'll get into the midterm stuff in a second. The politics stuff, because we're literally, as we're recording, we're literally 5 days away from the midterms. But before we get going on that, you were down here actually in Florida a couple weeks ago. I'm so sad we get a chance to link up, because you were actually close to my neck of the woods. But you were down here because you were doing some relief work on Hurricane Ian and whatnot. Tell us all about it.
So for my day job, Haitian American Caucus, we were doing disaster response in Lee County. So we were initially contacted by the Red Cross to help them identify and connect with the Haitian community in and around Fort Myers. They didn't have volunteers and staff who spoke Creole, knew where to start, things like that. So myself and our executive director from HAC Haiti, we met up in Miami and got some things together. And then I headed up to Fort Myers to connect with some Haitian pastors up there,
right,
and try to get relief to the Haitian community. We weren't able to get Red Cross centers set up in the church, but we've got ongoing efforts and to get supply and aid distributions happening at a church in Fort Myers. So I don't want to say too much about it yet, because we're still ironing out details.
Right.
But I want to invite all the viewers and listeners to text Ian Relief to 44321. Again, that's Ian Relief to 44321. That way you can donate to HAC and help us raise funds for the shoe, clothing, and accessory distributions that we're setting up, as well as trying to put together hygiene kits, baby kits, a whole bunch of things. It's not, leading the A block on the news every night right now. However, the devastation is ongoing. For example, you heard things said like, I believe it was like the Florida Utility Commissioner or something like that, whoever is in charge of speaking to this, the week that I was there, which was the week immediately following the hurricane, that they would have power restored to all buildings which can accept it by, close of business that Friday. Well, buildings that can accept it is a big asterisk. And the reason for that is thousands of structures were so badly damaged they can't safely be reconnected to the electrical grid. So,
Right.
That is a big component. And if we're being frank, large corporate NGOs and government agencies like FEMA and the Red Cross tend to prioritize their response based on dollar value of devastation. What does that mean? Well, places where the damage costs the most is usually where the wealthiest people and businesses are. Right. So the rich are, as is no surprise, the rich are eating first, and poorer people, overwhelmingly in this Black, brown, and in particular Haitian community, are always, the last to receive help. So FEMA has been really focused on Sanibel Island and Fort Myers Beach, and rightfully so. The devastation is unspeakable. But other communities that are just a little ways inland that were maybe not as stable going into the disaster, or don't necessarily have the same kind of financial wherewithal to weather the administrative and insurance storm in the wake of the physical storm, these communities are being left behind. And so we're doing what we can to fill that gap. But I want to use this opportunity to compel people to keep your eyes on Florida, keep your eyes on Lee County, Charlotte County, Naples, Fort Myers, all these communities, not where the national news cameras were, but just a few blocks up the road where, poorer people in mobile homes, these other communities are, devastated and just not receiving the help.
Right. It's good to know that. It's good to know. A lot of people are still in the dark with these kind of things unintentionally. Yeah. Just don't know. So it's good to have people on the ground to be able to just give a little insight about what goes on beyond the disaster itself. All right. As I said, as we're recording, we're 5 days from the midterms. We're dropping this on Friday. It's a lot to get to here. It seems like, so when we last spoke, I think over the summer, maybe early summer. I think this is around the time where the Roe v. Wade thing became a thing. The Uvalde shooting, I think already happened at this point too. So we were under impression at that point that, okay, because before all this, I think you and I agreed, even last year, talking about our commentary for a while, that these midterms were going to be a bloodbath for Democrats, and that basically that Republicans had the inside track on this, taking back the House and keeping the Senate and all that, and making Joe Biden pretty much, no hands to do anything really for his main 2 years as president. Then you have, of course, Uvalde stuff happen, and you have the Roe v. Wade thing happen. So we think, okay, well, no, this is the Hail Mary probably the Democrats needed, or the bat signal the Democrats needed. But if you feel all the media, I don't know, this is the thing about media. Everybody has agendas, both sides. Is that Republicans still seem to be pretty much staunch and ensconced into like what it seems like. It looks like the red wave is still going to happen. I don't know how big it's going to be, but that's the vibe I get, man. I mean, these companies out of these midterms, and even some of the Democratic commentators like Dave Packman was talking about it on his podcast today. That the bad news for Democrats coming up. What's your feeling now on the midterms now coming in?
Well, as I'm sitting here right now, looking at some of the key House and Senate races, I see the Georgia Senate race. Has Herschel Walker up by 1. Nevada, it's only 1. Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz is down by 1. I'm blanking on the gentleman's name that's running against him, the lieutenant governor, the current lieutenant governor.
Is it Fetterman?
John Fetterman, thank you.
Yeah.
John Fetterman's got a 1-point lead. Ohio is 2 points red.
Advance,
Arizona's 3 points up blue. New Hampshire's 3 points up blue. So it's like, it's as tight gets, in all these races. And just as I'm scanning again, Connecticut House is, blue. It's 1 point, 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points. Everything's as tight as it can possibly be. Now, one thing that I did see the other night, I was watching a polling expert on one of the network shows, or cable network shows, and what he was describing was that he's predicting a big turnout of Gen Z, and which side of that necessarily can't, they're not getting good data on, because 18 to 29-year-olds don't typically participate in a lot of the standard polling methods. So they're seeing a lot of energy and a lot of turnout with like exit polls and early voting and whatnot from 18 to 29-year-olds. Now, how that's breaking, it's still kind of too early to say, because especially in a lot of in some of these states like Pennsylvania, you have laws where you can't you can't begin the count until election day.
Let me say quick. Okay. I'm glad you said that, because on the podcast on Tuesday, I did a little bit on this. Typically, that age demographic will tend to lean Democratic. Typically.
However,
but
it is
it's
notable
weird
that
now.
Since 2020, there's been a big right-wing youth movement that's kind of anchored in the like Christo nationalist, which is just a fancy way of saying fascist or white supremacist. But like, a lot of those youth group models from evangelical right-wing groups have been applied to political organizing with the youth. So there is a growing right-wing youth movement, but it's been, according to this polling expert, it's been difficult to quantify exactly how much and how effective that's been. And we know that historically, the younger the age group, the more left they tend to lean.
But also don't forget this also, and I'll simplify for you right now. And I'm not saying this is definitely is an or, but inflation affects everybody. It doesn't matter who you are. So
yeah, what is important though when you talk about inflation and rising costs is to understand who the messaging is coming from. Because if the messaging is coming from a right-wing pundit or political ad, they're going to be telling you that it's Joe Biden, it's wages, it's government spending, it's all this bullshit that it's not. When, for example, I just posted this on my story yesterday. It was a tweet from Robert Reich about how the J.B. Smuckers Corporation, the company that makes Jif peanut butter, as just one example of a consumer good where this is happening. They are proposing a $1.2 billion pricing increase across the board with their products. However, they're seeing an input cost increase of less than $900 million. So that means you've got a $300 million delta of pure profit. And what that tells you, and you're seeing this across the board, regardless of the consumer product, and oil company profits were just reported, and that was another big example of this. Corporations are using a legitimate supply chain, once in a century event, and they're milking it to artificially raise pricing and juice scarcity and rake in record profits. And as a result, we've seen a tremendous transfer of wealth from the lower 90% to the top 10%. In the United States, we've seen over 2,500 new billionaires created since 2020. And nobody on the right, when you're talking about inflation, is meaningfully proposing anything that is going to address a lot of these core causes of poverty. They're talking about crime disingenuously. They're talking about inflation disingenuously. And you've got over roughly 300 candidates out there spouting outright lies about the 2020 election, which is proving to be physically dangerous to the safety of Americans as political violence.
Here's the problem, and I don't disagree with what you're saying there. Here's the problem: you're not the average voter. You're more locked in. I'm more locked in.
Yeah, I mean, I do this as my job.
So. That's what I'm saying, right? You and I are locked into the news, the trends, all that stuff. The average voter does not watch the news either way, and so all they see is that everything's too high, gas too high, and all they look at. And I said this on the Tuesday podcast was that okay, this is too high. Who's in charge? Joe Biden. Why not? They agree to disagree. It's his fault. It's happening on his watch. So therefore, he go get the blame, and they'll make a decision based on that.
Yeah,
that's the issue.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that how you vote on that depends a lot on the messaging you're getting. So when you go state to state, particularly in states where you've got really heated Senate races, governor's races, House races, Secretary of State, election officials. Wisconsin and Michigan are in very dangerous, kind of forks in the road as far as the future of their election integrity. The messaging on the right has gotten so irresponsible that you have, more and more lifetime Republicans. I was just watching an interview the other day with the guy who, alongside Michael Steele at the Republican National Committee, ran the original Fire Nancy campaign back in 2009. And even he was saying that, they didn't admittedly see anything wrong with their messaging. They thought it was really funny. They didn't think there was anything that could incite violence or, any of that at the time. But then fast forward 2 years to the summer of 2011, or the fall of 2011, when Gabby Giffords was shot. And they all kind of looked at each other and went, oh shit, this is different. We need to turn the temperature down. And I think he just wrote a book, which is why he was on this news program. But the point of that is that the messaging, thanks to, Trump kind of like turned up the valve on something that started 30 years ago with Newt Gingrich.
Right. Correct. In 94.
That fire really got lit in the early 90s. Sort of with the inception of cable media and the 24-hour news cycle. And then you saw the heat turn up on the right in the House, kind of led by Newt. And it's been this sort of steady climb. We saw it kind of it gets ratcheted up again in a serious way when President Obama takes office and the Southern Poverty Law Center starts tracking all of this, increase in white supremacist activity on the internet and elsewhere. And then it gets ratcheted up again in 2016. And we think, it's hitting heights that it never could until, the idea that the election was stolen gets put out into the zeitgeist in 2020. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And people are pretending like, the violence isn't real, like that this rhetoric doesn't incite, danger. And, people are going to get killed if they haven't already. I've personally witnessed it. I've been at actions where I've had to drag people off the ground who were stabbed by Proud Boys and members of the Goyim Defense League. Like, people will die if they haven't already, and it just hasn't been reported.
Yeah, I definitely see your point there. You mentioned also too earlier a while back that the January 6th stuff could actually impact the election. I don't know if I see that right now.
No, I thought it might have a bigger impact, and it's really not resonating. And I think honestly, it's just because we've got so many bigger fish to fry that the average consumer of news is more worried about, the economy, health for, women capable or people capable of pregnancy, people with uteruses, and
basically fringe issues.
Yeah, it kind of falls down the list. And I think that for the people who do tune in or catch the things they see on the J6 committee hearings and whatnot, they're probably horrified by it. But that the average American is not watching it like you and I are. No,
not at all. And I'll be honest, I'm not even as engaged as I thought I would be with January 6th stuff. Like I already know. To be honest, I already know how I feel about it. So
I mean, enough to know, just following it casually, that there's really nothing meaningful other than information that's going to come out of Congress. And,
right.
Maybe Donald Trump gets held in contempt of Congress for violating a subpoena. But ultimately, the enforcement and the ultimate opportunity for consequences are going to fall on Merrick Garland anyway. So, and what the Justice Department
that's
chooses to do with the congressional report.
That's a great segue because I had a list to hear Donald Trump. You hear. I think he did a rally. I think last week has a rally scheduled. I think the same days DeSantis has one somewhere down here in Florida. Somewhere else, whatever. There's definitely news about Trump. About I feel like we're inching closer and closer to him being subpoenaed now.
You mean by the Justice Department?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
I think the more quieter it is, I think the chance that he's going to speed is pretty high. A lot of noise.
I think between the Georgia election case and Senator Graham losing his bid to stay out of that,
I saw that
at the Supreme Court level,
mm-hmm.
between the New York, the Manhattan DA stuff and the New York AG stuff against the Trump corporations, and the Trump, I believe it's Trump Organization and relevant executives, so it includes him and all the kids.
Right.
You know, the J6 stuff that is pending, all of this, you know, one of these things is going to go, and either I think it's going to finally maybe let the air out of the Trump sails once and for all. I hope it does. Because as long as he is not somehow criminally or legally ineligible to run for president in 2024, he's obviously going to.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
think he's getting indicted in some way, shape, or form in the next year.
It would not shock me, honestly, dude, that there are Republicans like that we don't even know about, that while they say they support Trump publicly, in the back they know he's not good for that party overall.
That's literally what they've been saying for 6 years, all over
and
like liberal media. Is that like that's been one of Joe Scarborough's biggest things, is that like he, you know, it starts with his mea culpa of, you know, them giving Trump so much free air and letting him just be a gas bag on their time. And then basically saying an overwhelming and a resounding yes to the very question you just posed, is that like, yeah, these assholes say this stuff all the time in private, and they don't have the spine to say it on camera or in public because they know it'll piss off their base, because they would rather win than denounce crazy people.
And
winning is more important.
What I was going to say too, also on top of that, was that it wouldn't tell me those same people are feeding information to.
Yeah, it's why they don't denounce, you know, groups that have been designated terrorist organizations in other countries, like the 3 Percenters. It's reasons, you know, despite the fact that, like, for example, again, Southern Poverty Law Center, Anti-Defamation League has, you know, the 3 Percenters, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, Patriot Front, all these groups listed as terrorist organizations and dangerous right-wing organizations, despite the fact that DHS and the Justice Department have said that white nationalist, politically driven violence is our number one threat to safety. You know, Republican politicians would rather have, you know, a cup full of liberal tears, than a conscience.
That's a vibe I get sometimes too. A lot of Republicans, especially today in 2022. I feel like the Democrat plan here probably is like, I think in the back of their heads they probably know they're gonna get shellacked in the midterms, because I think they are. I mean, I don't know how you can deny that. The inflation.
It's hard to say. I think it's close. I think if this pollster that I listened to is correct, that Gen Z turns out in a way that's not really being tracked in the polling on like 538 and Real Clear Politics and all that kind of stuff. That's the only thing that could probably stave it off.
Right. But I think the all-in
also, I wouldn't be surprised too if, in the same way, there were a whole lot of people saying they weren't, you know, that they were, you know, in the polling that they weren't going to vote for Trump, and then in the privacy of their voting booth they did. I wouldn't be surprised if in places like Texas, you see a lot of votes that the polling doesn't reflect going to Beto, because it is people who are either, you know, women, non-binary, you know, whatever, and people who love and support them and understand the threat that they face, voting ethically, as opposed to, you know, what their neighbors and family and friends want to hear.
Interesting point of view.
I'm not saying that's gonna happen, but I think it wouldn't surprise me.
But what is clear though, Mark, also too, and I said this, I had him on my buddy Duke on this podcast a couple months ago, and he's another guy in Massachusetts, liberal, very common sense guy. Say this too, and I agree with him. I think we're going through another political realignment again.
I mean, it happens. It happens basically every 50 years, and we're kind of on. We're on. You know, the swing of 50. the economy and the political parties kind of tend to realign the big pushback on the New Deal and mid-century prosperity kind of started around 1970 and picked up steam around 1980. But yeah, we're there. So I think you're absolutely right.
I think Florida's a big example of that. I already said that. Florida, people think Florida's a red state, but yet they're two of the biggest things they approved in the state the last 2 years was minimum wage going up $50 an hour, which is approved. We're on the way up there now. And then, recreational marijuana, two major liberal Democratic points but somehow the Democratic Party can do well here when it comes to elections.
And suffrage for people, for formerly convicted people.
Right, that too. But yet, when it comes to electing governor, electing senators, the GOP dominates and has been dominating for like over 2 decades now. Riddle me that. I don't understand that. I don't understand it.
It was interesting because I was just there and I was in two very different reflections of South Florida. As I was telling friends that the minute you get out of Miami-Dade, mm-hmm. and this applies kind of gray area to Broward. But boy, the second you get out there and you get across, what is that, like Gator Alley or whatever, and you start making your way to Naples, you are in the South, fella. Holy shit.
So the liberal,
it is so instantaneous.
So the quote unquote blue side, liberal side of the state is all South Florida, Palm Beach, Dade, Broward, Orlando, Tampa, Tallahassee, the end.
Yeah. Holy crap. Yeah. By the time you get to Naples, it was funny because being in Naples I went to, I can't think of the name of the little island that was out there that I went to. But it reminded me a lot of Coronado here in San Diego. And it was one of those things that it was like where the military and the MAGA go to the beach.
Jesus.
I went to a bar. I was like looking around the lobby of the hotel and I was just like, holy crap.
Yeah. Are you following the Herschel Walker race?
Yeah.
Weird shit, dude. What a weird race, man. And he's leading my point.
It's actually a great reflection of the point I was trying to make, that ethics have no place and winning is everything.
This guy shouldn't be leading me. If we go based on the optics, he shouldn't be leading by point.
Dr. Warnock is a literal pastor, and the party of the Lord, the pro-choice party, is all about the guy who's had multiple abortions,
admittedly too,
violence,
and even his Trump-loving son called him out. Christian Walker called him out.
Don't get me started on Christian, but that kind of tells you everything. Like,
yeah, and I can't stand that kid, for the record.
No, and he's insufferable.
Yeah. The grifter.
But again, it's this complete moral bankruptcy that is enforced by a multimedia force field. Like they talk about liberals. It's the same. Everyone is just really entrenched. The difference is one side of the spectrum, and this isn't even like Republican or Democrat, because you and I talk about this privately. My personal political philosophy is way outside the scope of parties. But like, one party is objectively lying and perpetuating misinformation, disinformation, and courting the vote of conspiracy theorists, domestic terrorists, and really dangerous people who would do violence against their enemies when given the chance. And it's really disheartening. It's very, you and I, again, I think last time we talked about, the Weimar Republic. There's frighteningly many overlaps between where we see our political climate and where Germany found itself, 1928 to 1932.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It's not surprising it's close because Georgia is. We know Joe Biden won Georgia in 2020. By 13,000 votes, if that. So
Something like that.
We knew it'd be a close race anyway, regardless. So, but I think what I'm shocked at is the fact that you got a guy in Herschel Walker who should be in any normal time of any era, regardless of party, unelectable. Shouldn't even be nominated for your party's seat.
Yeah.
Less. And yet this guy's winning my point. That's why I'm a little like, whoa, okay, we got to talk about this here.
Yeah, I don't know what else to call it other than, kind of heartbreaking for, I do like to believe in a lot of the call it like, the Book of Aaron Sorkin, as far as, the idea that while America is incredibly flawed, it is built on white supremacy and capitalism, a document that was written that is malleable and adjustable, and we've often been a group of people who say we can do better despite our challenges and our disagreements and the circumstances we face. So I'm not seeing that right now, and that's the part that's so frustrating. For example, you have things like when Congress put forth an aid package for Hurricane Ian and Fiona to provide relief in Florida. Every member of the House Republican caucus from Florida voted against it for their own constituents, because it was, put forth by a liberal and it was going to make Joe Biden look good. Like, are you shitting me? For your own state? Like, owning the libs is that much your priority?
And the funny thing is that you like Joe Biden.
No, I don't. Fuck Joe Biden all day. Like, but
let's go, Brandon.
Because that's just stupid. I'm not letting them have that W. No, that's dumb. But I mean, kind of, yeah. Joe Biden has dropped the ball on a whole bunch of things. He's talking about putting Haitian people up in Guantanamo Bay. There's 200,000 Haitians languishing in Tijuana awaiting asylum and refugee status. The Ukrainians are getting the red carpet treatment. $50 billion. Haitians don't have food, water. Cholera is on the rise. Just today, for the first time in months, Port-au-Prince is kind of, sort of starting to resume some sense of commerce as some of the gang blockades are being lifted.
Right.
But, so no, I'm wholly dissatisfied with the bulk of Joe Biden's work. But at the end of the day, one side of the political spectrum is courting the conspiracy theorists, the election deniers, the Capitol insurrectionists, and the domestic terrorists and white supremacists, and one party isn't. One party is engaging in disinformation and outright lying in order to win. Another party isn't. And so while, I'm definitely a lot more Team Katie Porter, for example, people who are actually within the constructs of this system doing the best they can for their constituents, no. A lot of the Democratic leadership has fallen completely short, and they've been scrambling for the last 9 months to try to get some bills across the finish line so that they don't completely get their ass.
And that's the thing also too. I think we need to hold the Democratic Party accountable for the shit they're not doing and why they're in the party, why they're doing the mess they're in now.
100%. 100%. The leader, for the leadership and the administration not to do more to bust the asses of people like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema for dragging their feet and letting these critical aid packages, die or get gutted or get picked apart by the other side because they're getting paid or because of, some other frivolous reason. No. To have not the fact that the George Floyd Justice and Policing bill has been sitting for 2 years in languishing in the Senate is unconscionable. And so, I mean, there's so many things, whether it's, climate, voting, voter rights protections, women's health, maternal health, healthcare in general, prescription drug costs, like all of it. Yeah. Pretty much every consumer product on the market that costs, double or, 30-40% more than what it did 2 years ago. for no good reason.
I think the most interesting race of the entire spectrum, honestly, of any like state, I think it's the PA races between the Senate and the governor's race. You have the senator race between Dr. Oz and John Fetterman, and then you have the other one, the governor race between was it Mastriani and Mastriano. The other guys, the Democratic.
I can't think of the Democratic candidate's name now for the governor of Pennsylvania.
To me, who would have thought that state has the most intriguing race? And although that was a state that put Joe Biden over the top in 2020.
Yeah, it's Shapiro and Mastriano, and Shapiro's currently holding a nearly 11-point lead over Mastriano. So
this is what I don't understand, though. So how is it that he's leading by 11 points in the governor's race, but in the Senate race, Fetterman, is it because of Fetterman's the stroke?
Yeah. And the messaging around the really shitty, disingenuous messaging around that, and trying to say he's incapable of doing the job because he had a stroke when Dr. Oz doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about on his best day, and doesn't even live in the state of Pennsylvania. But one of the things that's really important to understand too is spending by whether it's by PACs or by the national committee. The one I can cite off the top of my head, but this is happening across the board to ensure a red wave in 2022. But like in Katie Porter's district, her Republican opponent has spent $9 million on attack ads in the district, and the DNC has spent $300,000 on hers. So, that's happening in tons of these critical markets. I'm seeing it here in San Diego. Some of the ads that are running about, basically trying to depict migrant people as vermin that are being invited by Joe Biden to rape your children and murder your family and steal your job while they're at it. It's really disgusting and inhumane. And those ads are running constantly during the World Series and, Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, things like that.
Big audience. Biggest audiences of the week.
Yeah. So absolutely. No, I mean these dark money groups are spending shit tons on this election in order to push right wing narratives.
Look, I'm not a registered Democrat or Republican, man, but this is one of my biggest criticisms of the Democratic Party. And after 6 years, you think, okay, this is we gotta play dirty. I don't know why they don't play dirty. I'm not suggesting to do that, but it baffles my mind that they allow shit to slide the way they do.
Well, it's more, what it is? It's a lot of it, I think, has to do with.
Is it the Michelle Obama thing?
People don't understand how big the tent of the Democratic Party has to be because of the two-party system in this country. Mm-hmm. So you have this huge divide between the leadership centrists and the other members of the party that make up the more progressive caucuses. And so there's this, it's elitism bullshit and mean girl cattiness kind of stuff, where they don't spend the money because they're Bernie, they don't spend the money in a given district because they're Bernie supporters. So they don't give them all the national support that they could, or they do incredibly dumb shit like put money behind extremist candidates on the right in primaries because they think that there's no way they can possibly win.
Herschel Walker is about to probably win the Georgia race. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Look around and find out, guys.
Yeah, I mean, and frankly, it's the same thing that the centrists did in the Reichstag to the communists and leftists and other more progressivists in the German landscape.
It's that mindset, okay, well, we're not going to help you out, but when we get to general, we need you guys to support us to beat the to beat that guy, the other guy, or that party.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous.
Exactly.
And I look back at the 2016. I gave people a lot of shit about Bernie supporters, not coming through for Hillary, that was real fucked up. In hindsight, honestly, I think the party deserved that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the direction that 4 years of Trump took us, but in a vacuum, yeah, fuck her.
Sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need a rude awakening. And I feel
God, and I am so sick and tired of her. Like, I just wish she would go away. She keeps popping.
She's around still? She's still popping up?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because it's like, networks like MSNBC and stuff keep bringing her on. All the like, I mean, over
honestly,
40.
what kind of value does she have at this point now to the political climate today? I don't see, and I mean this sincerely. I don't see what value she has.
It's that same rich liberal circle jerk, like, where they think they're progressive and they're not, because they're really aligned by their wallets to the people on the right and the people in the middle, and it comes down to classism. They don't give a fuck about poor people.
Good point. That's a good point. So before I let you go, your prediction on everything. You have to go line by line. Okay, does the Republicans take the House back?
I don't think so.
Really?
I don't think so.
Do you think the Hail Mary is going to work?
Actually, no. Actually, I think they might get the House, and the odds are probably higher that the Democrats preserve the Senate. I mean, it might shuffle a little bit, but I think it's probably like they preserve a narrow split in the Senate more likely than they.
Well, we're split now, 50-50 with the tiebreaker going to Kamala.
No, I know, that's what I'm saying. Some of the seats there might be a little musical chairs happening, but I think the numbers ultimately break out about the same.
It's possible. You think the Dems could gain one more seat in the Senate? Maybe.
Possible. Yeah, and then I think the most the thing I'm hoping for, and I think if the predictions on young voters are correct, I think that the Democrats may be able to maintain a slight lead in the House, but it's gonna be razor thin.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little more. I say pessimist on that.
I think it's pretty reasonable to suggest that it goes to the Republicans, which is really scary, because that's going to give people like Marjorie Taylor Greene a lot of power, and make an asshole like Kevin McCarthy the Speaker of the House. My hope is that they get indicted before they can do too much damage.
Well, we'll see what happens there. Mark, thanks for coming on the pod as always, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, and for at least a few more days, go Phillies!
Oh God, stop! Stop!
Look, I am a traumatized Dodger fan, and while there are no Dodgers to root for, and the fucking cheating ass Astros are still are in the World Series, I think I join most of the country in saying that I'm a Phillies fan this week.
I think it's safe to say I'm the only non-Astros fan rooting for the Astros in this country. I don't care.
No words. Dude, that video of AJ Pollock still circulates, and it's been making the rounds again, of him playing for the White Sox, where he catches, I think it was either Bregman or Springer, but they hit a fly ball to Pollock, and you can see him mouthing after he catches it. It's like a routine fly, probably 5-8 feet in front of the track. And he brings it in, and as he's throwing it into the cutoff man, you can see him go, "Fuck you, bitch."
Good job, Mark. Once again, thank you to both Dean Simpson and Marc Francois for coming on the podcast this week. And now here's my perspective here. I'm gonna keep it simple. My prediction for these midterms: I think the Republicans are going to take back both the House, and I think they may as well take control of the Senate as well too. I think at the end of the day, I know the Democrats are gonna run on the fact that it's women's rights on the line, which is important, obviously, women's rights and right to choose, gun control, all that, and that was the bat signal that kept the Democrats, I think, in my opinion, in line to possibly, stop the bleeding. Because prior to that, like I said, we all agree, people who follow this stuff on a day-to-day basis, that the Republicans were heading to a bloodbath. But at the end of the day, the one issue I can't get myself past, and the reason why I think Republicans are going to dominate midterm Tuesday, is inflation. Inflation is still the number one thing on the ballot, and regardless of the other issues out there, fringe issues out there that people care about, and I'm not saying not to care about it, but when your wallet is being impacted every day. The common person who does not follow day-to-day politics is not going to go look and see, okay, what is in that? They're going to see, okay, well, my wallet is bad. I'm making less money. I'm paying more money for gas. Okay, who's in charge? And you look who's in charge. It's Joe Biden and the Democrats. Democrats right now have the House and the Senate. And right off the cuff, whether or not it's right or wrong, they're gonna view their vote, or they're gonna go to the booth looking at that, and most likely gonna go the other way and try the other way around. You know, there's a lot of people who believe that, regardless of like Donald Trump or not, and I'm not a Trump guy, you know this already, that there are a lot of people who were in a better position financially anyway than they are today because of inflation. Now, I agree. I think personally inflation was going to happen regardless if Donald Trump or Joe Biden's in office. It doesn't matter. That's my opinion. But the common person who does not follow politics day to day is not going to see the world that way. And that's the bottom line. And to be honest with you, that's anybody who votes. If it's a Republican-dominated situation here, they see who's got in charge, they go the other way. See what happened in 2020 with COVID. I thought Donald Trump was going to win 2020, and then COVID happened, and the way people were not happy with the way he handled COVID, he's in charge, they vote Democrat. It's just that simple. Sometimes it's simple as that. Sometimes it has to be as complicated. So once you get past the fringe issues, it comes down to, okay, what impacts me right now? And inflation is the one ballot. To me, and people are going to hate me for saying this, but I don't care. Inflation, along with gas prices, is the most important thing on the ballot, even more than women's rights, even more than gun control, all that. That's just it. That's just a reality situation. So this is why I think Republicans will take the House back, and I think we'll get a slight lead also in the Senate as well too. And I've said already that I think maybe the Democrats probably need to take a little bit of a lesson learned here, because whether or not they're blamed for this, some of the optics here they've shown in the last 2 years, not very good. Telling people that we're not going through a recession, when in fact the signs are there. I don't know. It's just one of those things where sometimes you take a step back and it does reality. That's my opinion, of course, though. So I think Republicans are going to dominate, continue to dominate, despite the bat signal of Roe v. Wade, the bat signal of Uvalde and the gun control and all that. I think the Republicans are going to take back the House and get select control in the Senate and make Joe Biden pretty much his hands cuffed for the next 2 years, and then we'll see how 2024 runs out. So that's just my opinion. Guys, thank you once again for listening to this podcast. Again, thank you to Dean Simpson. Thank you to Marc Francois coming on the show, and we'll get back to normal next week. So enjoy the rest of your weekend, and take care.